Hello, hello. Today we have 14 different fantasy starts from 14 different matchups. Sunday morning to Monday night, like usual. Another doubleheader for that Monday night. Don't know how I feel about that, but let's start with that abroad game. Sunday morning, Rams versus Jacksonville. My king is down, Puka Nakua. At least for this week, it's looking likely. So we're going to go with his replacement. If you need that desperate flex star or just replacing any of the other injured receivers, there's so many right now. Jordan Whittington, he has a hopeful past, at least. He has been a good replacement for Puka. Him and Tutu, both fine. They get a basically the exact same production, routes, targets, really everything. The last year when Puka has missed games. So we saw two games last year when they were both on the field together, Whittington and Tutu without Puka. And this was with Cup. Obviously, Adams wasn't there, but this passing volume and passing attack, both better this year. So even though Adams has the best bump, I think Whittington is still playable here. In terms of the route tree, he fits Puka a little bit better. Tutu plays more in the slot, but he is definitely that downfield receiver. Like we know that. Average up the target, those vertical routes. In terms of that vertical route tree, Atwell's running a vertical route over 50% of the time. Puka is really low at 21%. Whittington is at 30%, so closer to that. And he's shown promise in the past. His targets per route has been 25% in those two games without Puka. He had 8 targets and then he had 10 targets. Atwell was pretty similar, and he's had double-digit fantasy points, an ethical double-digit fantasy points. It wasn't just a lucky touchdown and he had 2 catches. Both times he got there on those yards and receptions. Same for Atwell. So those 8 targets, 10 targets, that's definitely possible. So for your PPR league, if you're looking for that desperate flex play, I think Whittington is fine here. This next game, we got the Saints in Chicago. I'm going to keep going with DeAndre Swift. He's been amazing. Off the bye, his snaps were lower, but he was still incredible. It was his 5th straight game of 15 plus touches. This time last year, he was averaging under that. Now he hasn't had a single game under 15 touches. So I think that there's some confidence right there. His receiving is incredible. 12 yards after catch per reception right now. And this offense is just perfect for running backs. Number 1 in that run block win rate. So the Saints defense, they're actually good against the run. Better than you'd expect probably. But Ben Johnson, the situation, his volume right now, everything is perfect. And he's hot right now. So last year we saw this where he got in a hot streak. You don't want to sit Swift in this 4-game stretch where he's just getting 100 yards every single game. So I don't want to sit Swift after this big game, especially just with everything looking perfect, except maybe the defensive matchup surprisingly isn't the greatest, but that game script, Saints at home, so should be solid there. Miami and Cleveland, this one's tough. I'm going to say both defenses. Main reason here is the weather. So if you're watching this on Saturday, Sunday morning, whatever it is, check the weather of this game. It is some crazy rumors on the wind potential of this game, like 30-mile-an-hour winds. These are the two quarterbacks that you don't really want that. The two Hawaiian quarterbacks, it's going to be 60 degrees, rainy, and tons of wind. So the passing attacks for these games, and you're kind of like, there are already pretty good defenses to play against these offenses. And then you add in that weather, there's lots of potential there, especially for like a Browns team, the Miami defense, because the Browns dropped back 58 times last week. So you want a fantasy defense against a team that is passing the ball that much, more opportunities for turnovers, more opportunities for sacks, and Miami's got good pressure. New England and Tennessee after that, another flex start. I would say Stefon Diggs. I'm still confident in Diggs going forward, especially just like what we saw last week. Only 26 passing attempts, and May looked incredible again. So this passing attack is amazing. They spread it out a little bit last week, and they had those 250-yarders called back for May, so that's really annoying, but still, really good passing attack in general. And Diggs this week has the best matchup out of the receivers. Obviously, still that number 1 guy in general. 36% targets per route this season. That's great right now. Elite passing offense. And Roger McCreary is going to be his matchup in the slot. He's the most targeted out of those Titans corners right now, and he's bottom 10 in terms of yards per route allowed compared to every other corner in the NFL. So Diggs, fine with him in the flex right now. And one more desperate guy before we get into some guys that are a little bit more confident, and that would be the Jets' Mason Taylor. Tough week last week. He's fully dependent on garbage time so far in terms of his production. But, one, Carolina, overall a fine matchup, good for tight ends. But the big thing is Garrett Wilson is not there. And if we're looking at the target share, these last 3 weeks with Justin Fields, 29% target share for Wilson, 23% for Mason Taylor. That next guy is down at 10%. So with no Wilson, he's already getting a 23% target share. And then you add in that other 30%. Where's that going? So it has some potential. Tight end is not only fluky and inconsistent, hard to guess, all that sort of stuff. Basically, I don't want to overreact to last week. If you need a guy, like that Mason Taylor is in that top 5 tight end. But if you're desperate for tight end, I wouldn't not start him because he had 1 reception last week and obviously a horrible game. Because, example, Zach Ertz. Like Zach Ertz had 0 points, and then he came back next week, and he was great. And I could very much see the same for Mason Taylor this week. If you're in a PPR league, not a ton of scoring upside, but in that PPR league, still great upside just because of the receptions. Philly and Minnesota after that, an interesting one. Really tough matchup, I will say, for the Eagles against this Flores defense. Just the style that Flores runs against Jalen Hurts specifically, and they're off the bye. So I'm going to go on the Minnesota side here. We're going to go Jordan Addison. The quarterback situation, still up in the air. Wentz would be fine. McCarthy, honestly, is fine. But the big reason is just how this secondary lines up against Minnesota. So Quinyon Mitchell is projected to shadow Justin Jefferson. Obviously, you're still starting Justin Jefferson. But it's a downgrade for Jefferson. Helps out Addison, who's been great. Wide receiver 14 right now in fantasy points per game. They're off that bye week too, which, helps. And then you got Cooper DeJean in the slot. And then Addison on the opposite side, mainly going to be getting Adoree Jackson, who right now, one of the most targeted corners in the NFL. Part of that is because Quinyon Mitchell's on the other side and Cooper DeJean's in the slot. Exactly why we're going after Addison right here. A 35% target share to Adoree Jackson this season. So I like Addison as that flex too, especially with the upside that he brings. Great touchdown upside consistently. They pass so much in the red zone, and just once they get to that 20, they're just beaming it to him. The Chargers versus the Colts. The stat that I'm looking at in terms of predicting the Chargers' success is just that pressure rate. Herbert's the second most pressured quarterback in the NFL right now. When you are out without 3 offensive tackles, it doesn't help. But the Colts defense, they're good, but that pressure rate actually is pretty low. It's bottom 10 right now. And the guy that most benefits from that would be Quentin Johnston. Those downfield targets. So I really like him in this matchup. This passing game in general for the Chargers could be boosted a little bit. Without Quentin Johnston, if he misses this game again, well then I like Allen and McConkey both for other reasons, but generally like this passing offense today or on Sunday. And without Johnson, those other 2 guys become way more viable too. Xavier Worthy after that. Mahomes also under a lot of pressure, and his downfield target guy, Xavier Worthy, only 20% target share so far. Rashee Rice coming back. In terms of the rest of the season, I'm not as confident in a guy like Xavier Worthy, but the matchup here helps. He's been playing a decent amount in the slot, which I like, but for this game, with Rice coming back, he'll play more so on the outside, which is where the weakness is of this Las Vegas secondary. So that helps him. And he's kind of just missed a lot of opportunities downfield in terms of those unrealized air yards, basically like the incomplete air yards compared to what he's getting. He's the 3rd worst in the NFL right now these past few weeks to A.J. Brown and Jerry Jeudy. So we look at the situations there. It's like Jerry Jeudy, it's like, yeah, you kind of expect that right now. A.J. Brown, lots of issues there, kind of expected as well. With Mahomes, kind of playing out of his mind with Xavier Worthy, we wouldn't fully expect that. So even on that 20% target share, he's had 7 targets down, 20 yards downfield, like those big play, 20-yard shots. He's only had 1 catch in the last 3 weeks on those 7 targets. So hopefully he brings one of those in. He still has a ceiling. I wouldn't bench him with Xavier Worthy coming back. Denver versus the Giants. I don't know if I've said to start a guy more this year than Courtland Sutton. And I feel like I keep having to say it because he's had a couple of games where he's been horrible. 1 catch, twice. But those other games, he's averaged 20 points per game. And last week was a little bit more predictable. It was that Sauce Gardner shadow. So we saw it the week before with Pickens getting 4 targets. Sutton goes out there, gets 4 targets, 1 catch. But this matchup is a lot different. So he's had 2 really bad games, 4 games where he was amazing. I think he kind of goes back to being amazing. He's had other shadow corners like Quinyon Mitchell. He was the only guy to be good on Quinyon all season long. So this matchup, he is going to be shadowed actually. It's just a corner that you're not really scared of. All shadow corners are not the same. So this time it's going to be Adebo for the Giants shadowing him. They run the most man coverage in the NFL in general. So this matchup, he gets a nice bump in terms of playing against man coverage. And I just wouldn't bench him really ever, honestly, but especially just like preaching after these bad games. It happens. Last time he had that 4 target, 1 catch game. His very next game, when everyone benched him, he had 6 receptions for 118 yards and a touchdown. So I'm not really benching Courtland Sutton just because he had another bad game, because his other 4 have been top 10. Green Bay and Arizona, a desperate start getting back to that range. There's not too much going on in this game. Jacoby Brissett may be in there again. Marv might be out. Arizona is down to their RB3 and 4 again. So, it's just still not the greatest. But we're going to go Matthew Golden as that desperate start. If you've been hanging on to him and you're in a situation with buys or injuries, we're deciding between guys, I think Golden is solid here. His route share didn't bump up after the bye, which is a little frustrating, but his routes weren't bad in general. So he still had about a 65% rate, which is okay, but there's still no Jaden Reed. And the thing that sticks out is his targets per route weekly has gone up, which is nice. Since week 2, it was at 9%. Then it went to 15%. Then it went to 18%. And then last week it was 23% off the bye week. 11 yards per target. So those targets are pretty valuable right now. Wicks is banged up as well. So I still like Matthew Golden. He's that downfield receiver. Big play upside still. Hasn't fully come together in terms of one huge day yet, but he's put together some solid days. Only 5 targets against the Bengals last week, but had some really nice plays in there. So got him up to 85 yards. We are back for the weekly Cowboys segment saying to start everybody. It works every single week. It's the easiest fantasy advice ever. It's so much fun. This game may be the highest I've seen on the season in terms of a point total. The projected points of Washington versus Dallas is at 55. So I just think back to this Giants game because my start for this game is going to be both Ferguson and Pickens with CeeDee Lamb coming back. This past month without him, they've been the wide receiver 1 overall and tight end 1 overall. Just that alone is you got to start him. It's one of those, if they were the tight end 5 and the wide receiver 15 and their number 1 receiver is coming back, then it's yeah, I get it. Maybe you're not starting. And these guys are the number 1 players in fantasy the past month. I wouldn't bench them just because Lamb is coming back, because I look back at this Giants game where it was a shootout. And although Pickens' target share wasn't good that second game of his time in Dallas, he still got 9 targets because they threw 50 times. And then Ferguson in that game, 12 targets. So even with Lamb getting 12 targets, Ferg also got 12 targets. Pickens also got nearly double-digit targets. And overall, Washington's defense, they're 29th in explosive pass rate, so that's great for Pickens. They run a bunch of that one high safety, so it makes sense. 60% of the time, it's a really aggressive defense. So the secondary, honestly, as an NFL secondary, I don't think they're that bad, but in terms of fantasy, they haven't been the greatest right now. So I would say both those guys. Atlanta and San Francisco, similar to Pickens in a way in terms of theory here. I would say Kendrick Bourne. Last 2 weeks, he's been the wide receiver 4. I wouldn't bench him purely on that alone. So the matchup in general, not the greatest, but he's not going to be shadowed by AJ Terrell. So that helps. So when you're looking at the outside receivers against Atlanta as a whole, they're actually middle of the road. So the matchup isn't horrible. Nothing to take it away. Kittle is probably coming back, but I think that is primarily taking away from Tonjes. And if a second guy is affected more, I would say it would be CMC. And Tonjes these last 2 weeks, when Bourne was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy, had 18 targets. So I don't think Kittle is coming in here and taking away Bourne's volume, really. And again, wide receiver 4 in fantasy without a touchdown. So some of these guys, if I'm using a 2-week sample size, call me out if I'm this guy's the wide receiver 1. He's he probably had 2 touchdowns and 1 big play. But that's not the case with Bourne. It's all in terms of receiving yards and receptions in those PPR leagues. So the chemistry with Mac Jones, amazing. He's been that number 1 guy for him. But even if Purdy comes back, whoever is in there in terms of that 49ers offense, I trust in Shanahan over any of that quarterback play. He had a season high in terms of 81% of his routes last week. So overall, I'd go right back to Bourne. If you haven't right now, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. I think he's more of a confident play these next few weeks. Not just this week, but the next few weeks. I think he's a confident flex start. And the last 2 matchups are both going to be those Monday Night Football games. Tampa Bay and Detroit and Houston versus Seattle. 2 fun ones. I would say 2 fun ones. Maybe some good uniforms. Great uniform teams. I hope they have their alternates. I don't know. But we're going to look at Baker Mayfield in this matchup. I would still say to start him. His volume right now is quarterback 15. His production is quarterback 4. So that's a little bit worrisome in terms of looking at the talent around him when you have the quarterback 15 level volume without Ibuka, Mike Evans, Godwin. What's the production going to look like? I think the volume in this game makes up for that. I think it'll be a lot better than that 15th ranked volume that we've seen through 6 weeks because of this matchup. One, we're looking at that point total again. 53, second highest on the week. It should be a high scoring game. Two, they are 5-point underdogs. So it's a great passing game script. Number three, Detroit is 31st. I was about to say third. 31st in explosive plays allowed. So although they're a solid defense, this secondary has a lot of explosive plays, and they're down some guys. Arnold's still injured, Branch suspended, right? Yeah. And then for the scrambles, his efficiency on scrambles has been amazing so far. And I think this is purely like narrative, not really stat based. But I think Baker Mayfield is the guy where he's losing a bunch of his guys. He's just going to run, similar to a Patrick Mahomes, who's number one in scrambles right now, who went 3-4 weeks without Worthy, without much else, no Rice there, and he was just scrambling a ton. So if we get an uptick, which against a man-heavy defense in Detroit is very likely for quarterback scrambles, that can be really productive on the ground in terms of his rushing. So I would still start Baker Mayfield. I am starting him in a league, so if he sucks, at least know that he sucked for me as well. Houston and Seattle, this very last one, I'm going to go with Nico Collins. I've loved Nico Collins all year, really his whole career. And I was looking earlier because I have him on a team where it's like most people, it's like, oh, he's been a little disappointing. Looking further into it, it hasn't been amazing, but it's not as bad as I really perceived. Since week one, bad game in week one. After that point, 16 points per game. And he's the wide receiver 11. So there is some concerns with the volume, but there have been back-to-back blowouts in terms of beating Tennessee 26-0, then Baltimore 44-10. So I get that. The volume on a per route basis has been a little lower. That first read target share a little lower in this new offense, but off of the bye with the Seattle injuries in the secondary, I wouldn't bench him here in a spot because of all those factors. So the volume, you're hoping that improves. And that Monday Night Football primetime game off of the bye, I want them to focus on getting Nico with the ball, getting him more than just those 5-6 targets that he's seen in half of the games. But at the same time, great matchup in general because of those injuries and his production. Still wide receiver 1 level since week 2. Wouldn't bench him. Still great touchdown upside overall. Like him enough to have as a very confident wide receiver 2 on the week. That's all I got today, but tons of YouTube videos. So if you want more, check it out. I have my rest of season rankings up on my personal page. Yesterday, the buzz in the building on the podcast. So talking returns of CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, George Kittle, all that big news, and touchdown regression on Tuesday. So check all those out. Appreciate you and see you soon.